what would the current market for flood insurance, or would that current market for flood insurance be served under a privatization model?
Thank you. We are calling for increased privatization of the flood insurance program, not necessarily the complete elimination of the flood. Flood is a very difficult loss to model. That being said, I think the appetite of carriers and reinsurers would be quite healthy. We know that there is a significant capital surplus in both the reinsurance and carrier markets. Carriers are looking for areas to deploy that capital in order to serve markets, grow their market share. So I think it would be quite extensive. That being said, insurance companies are not going to take that first step to entering that risk until they understand fully the risk. And so that information coming to us, being allowed to set actuarially sound rates for the risk that is there, needs to be part of the reforms that to the overall protection of flood in the nation.
Would the private market be amenable to assuming the FEMA mapping process along with this privatization proposal?
Well, certainly, because we know that the better data we have, the better we can manage the overall risk. If we don't manage properly the risk of our company, small or large, we ultimately will go out of business. That's why we've been around for 175 years, because we look at the risk appropriately. Our owners are our policyholders. So I am not the owner of the company, I am the steward of the company. So the policyholders expect me to make sure that I'm mitigating the risk that ultimately protects their surplus, the policyholder's surplus. So I would see that the industry would enjoy engaging with the NFIP to make sure that the maps are correct, that they're updated on a frequent basis, and adapt to the changing climate that we see all around us that are driving more and more floods into these programs. I think there's an opportunity with the insurance industry coming in with its massive infrastructure of data that it can supplement and help not only policyholders at the home and business level, but also communities that are looking for ways to improve their infrastructures.
Ms. Granis, thank you, Mr. Linkus. Ms. Granis, what would privatization look like if it were to be, if it were to become the policy of the country?
I think there would be a couple things that I would look to in thinking about how the private insurance market would play a role within and to complement the NFIP. The first is the floodplain mapping program. You know, we want that information to be public. We want that information to be updated and accurate because it drives so many decisions about how we set insurance prices, where we build, how we build, who has to purchase insurance. So, you know, we want that information to be maintained as a public good. There's been proposals to include like a surcharge on policies to make sure that the floodplain mapping program continues to have the resources it needs. The second component that I would want to preserve is the role of the NFIP in encouraging communities to mitigate risk and to do things like have better land use practices in floodplains, have better codes and standards on the books. So we want to make sure that that public good is still preserved with a private role as well. And then I think the third prong of the flood insurance program that really has to be managed carefully is the affordability of flood insurance. This is the last line of defense for people if they are affected by flood insurance. This is the only money they have to rebuild. And so if those insurance prices go through the roof and lower income homeowners are not able to continue to maintain coverage or are priced out of their home, that will have significant resilience effects on communities and the ability of households to recover in the event of these extreme storms.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson, and I thank you all for your testimony today. If there are no further questions, I would ask unanimous consent that the record of today's hearing remain open until such time as our witnesses have provided answers to any questions that may be submitted to them in writing, and unanimous consent that the record remain open for 15 days for any additional comments